Yes, good day. Today is Thursday, 12th November. And today, once again, we're going to talk about absolute monarchies in Europe during the 18th century. And today, we're going to talk about absolute monarchies in England. And so, with that, let's go here. This, once again, is my handy dandy World Civ study guide that I issued you. In fact, I'll have it here on this page. Notice that we're on Roman numeral 17. Okay, so pushing forward, we talked about Peter the Great yesterday, who was on one end of the power spectrum, doing pretty much whatever he wanted. On the other end of the power spectrum, we have the kings of England. And what makes the difference between the kings of England and the kings of the rest of Europe is two things, actually. One is the fact that England occupied an island, which made the English more confident in their own security, so they could allow dissent, toleration. They didn't have to worry all the time about being conquered. Therefore, their rules could be a little more relaxed. And the other is, in the end, it's money. Yes. So, getting back to the matter at hand. Absolute monarchs in England were overthrown and Parliament gathered an increasing amount of power. Elizabeth had left a large debt and a parliament and an argument with Parliament over money. Yeah, that's what it is. Large debt and an argument with Parliament over money. Parliament, though, held something called, and you need to know this, the power of the purse. What is that? Well, today our government has it. Power of the purse means that the legislature, for example, in our government, the legislature, the Congress, they are the ones who can raise money. The king needs money, and how does he get it? He gets it from the legislature. Well, the legislature in this country, the Senate and House of Representatives, are not going to just give that money up for free. So if the king wants money or the president wants money, in the case of this country, and he goes to Congress, or the king goes to Parliament in England, Parliament says, we'll consider giving you some money, but first you have to do something for us. Normally, that something entailed giving them certain rights and privileges in the kingdom. So, and that's power of the purse, that the Parliament has the power of the purse. It's the old saying, Mr. Daly, Miss Hall, it's the old saying that he who has the gold makes the rules. The golden rule, yeah? It's power of the purse. If you have the money, then if you control the money, then you have a certain amount of power. That power of the purse, was all that stood between England's monarchs and an absolute monarchy. The struggle between the Parliament and the Crown had serious consequences and had a lot to do with the way England and both America's government developed. England's closest living relative was her cousin, James Stuart, which is ironic because James Stuart was the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, a woman who was executed by that same Elizabeth for plotting to have her overthrown. But anyway, when James I becomes King of England, this is the beginning of the Stuart Dynasty. James had the following problems to face as the new King of Scotland and England. Money issues, always number one. Power issues, because at this point in time in England, the question of who actually ran the country was not fully settled. James was a believer in there it is, divine rights of kings theory. Parliament, of course, had lived with the idea that, they were the ones who controlled the money and they should have some power. So religious grievances between the Puritans and the remaining Roman Catholics. And so, yeah, that was another thing. The word Puritan We're closing in on Thanksgiving. Yeah, in just 2 weeks, in fact. Yeah, we're closing in on Thanksgiving. And the idea of the Puritans, here's the thing. Do you remember when you were a little rugrat? I don't know, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and at your school they had the little Thanksgiving pageant. And you dressed up like what you call the Pilgrims, and other people dressed up like Native Americans, and you had a little Thanksgiving party and things of that nature. Well, those pilgrims that you dressed up as, they're Puritans. I mean, pilgrim is just a name of somebody who travels a long way for a religious purpose. And the Puritans left England because they were seeking religious freedom. Actually, they were seeking the right to be as mean as they wanted to be. I'm not joking here. I'm telling you, the Puritans are an interesting people. I mean, if you ever knew the real story of the Puritans, you would pretty much blow off, that happy little story of the first Thanksgiving and Squanto and all those things. Even though parts of that are true, it is. Well, and I'm getting off the topic. But here. This will help you understand the Puritans. Okay, a Puritan's worst nightmare, and this is not me. This is came from a person, uh, Judge Cotton Mather, I think his name was, who lived in New England and who saw the Puritans way too much. A Puritan's worst nightmare, he said, was that somebody, somewhere, was having fun, and that's a pretty good description. The Puritans were the ones, if you remember, who were responsible for the Salem witch trials, where I think it was 16 or was it 19 women were hung after being charged with witches, and one man was pressed to death. That means that they laid him on the ground and put a door on top of him, top of his chest, and then began putting rocks, big rocks, on the door until his chest could no longer expand. He died. Here's another. Puritans are outlawed in their community in Massachusetts. Puritans outlawed bear baiting. Now, bear baiting is a sport. Yeah. Bear baiting is a sport where a bear is muzzled and has one of its paws chained. I always wonder how they did that. I mean, bears are not just going to sit there and let you put a muzzle on their mouth. And the back leg is chained and spiked into the ground so it can't go anywhere. And then dogs are set upon the bear. Now, of course, the bear still has 3 operating claws and is stronger than any of the dogs. And the people who come to see the event bet on how many dogs will survive and all this kind of stuff. It's entertainment. Well, the Puritans opposed that sport, that cruel sport, not because it was cruel to the bear or the dogs, many of whom died, but because the people watching it enjoyed it. And if you understand that, then you understand about the Puritans. So let's get back to the matter at hand, shall we? Religious grievances between the Puritans who thought that the Anglican Church was not strict enough, and the remaining Roman Catholics in England. He did publish a new version of the Bible called, wait for it, the King James Version. Now, most Protestants, and that would include most of you guys, since I don't think we have that many Catholics in this school anymore, most Protestants, if they have a Bible in home, it's either the King James Version, which is this one, or it's a derivation translation of the King James Version. You see, And the King James Version, by the way, is simply where, and James didn't do it himself, the king had scholars translate the Bible from the Latin, the Catholic Latin Vulgate Bible, into English, which is why, if you ever read the King James Version of the Bible, it sounds like Shakespeare, because the two books, the two writings, were within 100 years of each other, so English hadn't changed that much. So, in 1625, the aging monarch James I died, leaving his son Charles I to be the new king of England. Now, James had been an old man, he died, and now this new king, Charles I, comes along. Charles also was a believer in the divine rights of kings and felt Parliament should give him money whenever he needed it. Parliament said no. On more than one occasion, when Charles I asked for money and Parliament refused it, he sent them home. That was called the Short Parliament and the Long Parliament. In 1628, Charles I reluctantly agreed to what was called the Petition of Right. And what the Petition of Right was basically, without enumerating all four, you don't have to. Basically, Charles agreed to respect the authority of Parliament. Yeah, and that's it. Now, even though Charles agreed to it and he signed it, everybody knew that he was going to violate it. He ignored it. So in 1629, he sent Parliament home again and raised money this time on his own through outrageous taxes, which Parliament said was illegal. Charles I further alienated the Puritans by siding with the Anglican Church. He also wanted Presbyterians, those are the Scottish Calvinists, to accept a version of the Anglican Book of Prayer. The Scots threatened to invade England, and of course, that caused a need for money, and this need necessitated the recall of Parliament. Parliament refused to give him the money, and this time Charles tried to send the army to Parliament to arrest the so-called ringleaders. This resulted in rioting and unrest, forcing Charles to flee north, where he was more popular and could raise an army of his own. What ensued then was called the English Civil War of 1642 to 1649. Okay, let's look at a cartoon, shall we? I like political cartoons. Pictures. And we go down to yes. Open with, come on. The excitement's unbearable. Yes, this is a political cartoon, and I love political cartoons. First of all, before we talk about it anymore, let's define what a political cartoon is. A political cartoon is a form of satire, and satire is a form of comedy that tries to draw attention to something serious by making fun of it. And this is such a cartoon. And this cartoon depicts the English Civil War, which is what we're about to start talking about, as what is called a pit fight, a dog fight, which was another form of entertainment that the Puritans didn't really approve of. In the English Civil War, there are two sides. Let's pull this back up again, shall we? There are two sides. There are the Cavaliers and the Roundheads. Okay. The word Cavalier actually comes from the French word chevalier, which means man who rides a horse. It is where we get our word cavalry from. It is where we get our word chivalry from. Well, a man who can ride a horse is a person of money during this time. Now, on the other side were the Roundheads. Where did that name came from? Well, the Roundheads were the Puritans. They were called Roundheads because they cut their hair short, as opposed to the Cavaliers who wore their hair long, flowing, very stylish. But so let's get back to this cartoon, shall we? Now, here you see the two sides. These guys, once again, look at, now you say, well, their hair is long. Not for the day that they were in. This actually was considered short hair. And also notice their dress, from their plain hats through their jackets down to their simple buckle shoes. These are the Puritans. These are the Roundheads. Over here, you have the Cavaliers. Well, what makes you say they're Cavaliers? Well, one, look at their hair. That's not shaggy hair. That's fashionable hair in the 17th century. Number two, their clothing. See, it has sashes and buckles and all those kind of things. And look down here. What is that? Yes, these people obviously, as you can tell, spend time riding horses. Yes, these are the Cavaliers. In fact, look at the dogs. Even the dog has a hairstyle. And so they add dialogue. Notice the Puritan urges his dog on, saying, "Bite him, Pepper," which common name for an English dog. And over here, the Cavalier answers, "To him, Poodle." And then even the dogs get into trash talking. See, look, this dog calls the other dog Cavalier Dog, rather unimaginative name. This dog calls his opponent a Roundhead cur. You say, what's a cur? A cur is a person of low birth. Yeah. All right. And so yeah, that's the cartoon. It's a commentary depicting the English Civil War as a pit fight. So, getting back to it. Who were the Cavaliers? Yeah, we already went over who were the Roundheads. They're the Puritans. The Cavaliers supported Charles I. The Roundheads supported the Parliament. And along will come this guy, Oliver Cromwell. While we're looking at pictures, let's look at another picture, shall we? L-M-N-O. Oh. There it is. I wanted to see that. Open where? I always knew this picture would come in handy. That is what is called a death mask. And I saw that. I took this picture. I was in London in the British National Museum of History. And this is the death mask of Oliver Cromwell. And you say, what's a death mask? It's when somebody dies, they actually take a mold of their face to preserve them in perpetuity. And yeah, that's the death mask of Oliver Cromwell. And this is Oliver Cromwell mounted on a horse at the time. Now, we still haven't answered who is Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell was a very ardent Puritan, who led the Puritans to victory in the English Civil War. Charles I was captured and was executed, beheaded for treason. And now see, when it says how significant was the execution of Charles I, Quite significant. I mean, come on. These people actually put their hands on the king, on God's anointed, which you're not supposed to do. And then they executed the man. What did it mean for the future of English government? Well, it pretty much meant that, you know, the Parliament had proved that they were a force to be reckoned with. They executed their own king. Yes. Of democratic government? Well, obviously, same thing. The Cromwellian period lasted. That means after the death of Charles I, Oliver Cromwell ruled England as Lord Dictator or Lord Protector for 11 years. As Lord Protector, Cromwell abolished the English monarchy and the House of Lords and tried to establish a Puritan republic. And I'm going to tell you, as much as people hated Charles I, Oliver Cromwell was worse. Now, we'll get into Cromwellian rule in a minute, but yeah, Oliver Cromwell was the original no fun guy. He tore up the Constitution and established a military dictatorship. He crushed a rebellion in Ireland and established British control of Ireland, which they will not let go of until 1918. Ireland became an English territory and was rebellious. Cromwell crushed the rebellion with an army and gave, notice this, underline this, and gave Irish lands to English soldiers, predominantly Scottish soldiers. If you've ever heard the term Scotch-Irish, for example, the 7th president of the United States, Andrew Jackson, was Scotch-Irish. That does not mean he was half Scottish and half Irish. That means he was descended from people who were sent to Ireland and were given land. Yeah, they're not really Irish. But notice this next thing. This transformed Ireland from a population of land renters to from population of land. This transformed Ireland from a population of landowners, there it is, to land renters who paid taxes not only to the English government, but also to the Anglican church. I visited Ireland, beautiful country. But when the English took over Ireland, they took over everything. They took over not just the land, they kicked all the Irish off their land, and now the Irish had to pay rent to these British landlords. But one of the changes that the English did in Ireland and in Wales and in Scotland was that the British government compelled the Irish, the Welsh, and the Scottish that they had to speak English. They could no longer speak their native languages. And in Ireland, they could no longer practice their dominant religion, which was Roman Catholicism. Roman Catholicism became a capital crime, meaning a death penalty crime in Ireland until 1832. And so, and by the way, yes, dominant religion of Ireland was and is Roman Catholicism to this very day. Ireland has the largest percentage of Catholics in the world. Percentage, not the largest number, but percentage. So Cromwell, interesting guy, tried to turn England into a no fun zone. Really, he did that. Look, he closed down everything he saw as sinful. Theater, that means the Shakespearean theaters. Gaming, that means the aforementioned bear baiting, pit fighting, gambling, bars and taverns, prostitution was outlawed, drinking was outlawed. Get this, Christmas was outlawed. Yeah. Oliver Cromwell banished Christmas. And not only that, he destroyed the crown jewels. He went into, of course, the National Treasury in the Tower of London, where they still are now. He went in there and had all the crown jewels, because he saw them as sinful, cut into pieces and sold. Of course, the king who came after him, restored that. But he did, however, allow religious tolerance, except for Roman Catholics, of course, and also allowed Jews back into England, making England rather progressive in that regard. Okay, that was Cromwell. Why don't we end there today? We'll pick up later on with Charles II. Another interesting story. So Cromwell was not a fun guy. Thank you all very much, and I hope I feel better tomorrow. Bye now.